This is section 43 of Newspaper Articles by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Newspaper Articles by Mark Twain, section 43, part 4. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 1864. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 15th, 1864. An ingenious contrivance. There is nothing in the Mechanics' Fair more ingenious or pleasanter to look at than the skating pond, and neither is there anything about the pavilion which is half so hard to find, unless it be the wretched schoolboy who stealthily rings Dexter's excellent but distracting door-gong, and then melts suddenly away under the neighboring billiard-tables, and is seen no more in life. But the skating pond is really easy to find when you have intelligent directions by which to guide yourself. From the main entrance you go straight to the floral tower, and glance off at an angle of 45 degrees to the left and forwards. Preserve the direction thus secured until you reach the wall of the building, and your object is attained. The skating pond sits on a table in a neat parlor, and if you would have one like it, you should line the inside of a wash-tub with mirrors, have the bottom peopled with male and female dolls in skating attitude, and arrange it so that it will turn around rapidly. You will observe that the little figures will be multiplied in the mirrors into countless multitudes of hurrying and scurrying skaters, growing smaller and smaller and more crowded together, as far as the eye can reach into the limitless distance. And if your dolls are dressed in as perfect good taste and appropriate colors, and are arranged in as faultless skating postures as are these of which we are speaking, you cannot fail to be delighted with the liveliness, the unlimited variety, and the magnificence of the scene. And if you are anything of a skater yourself, you must infallibly become inoculated with the dash and spirit and rushing excitement of it. Put your eyes down to the rim of the tub (this one is handsome enough for a drawing-room), and look far away into the mirrors, and you may see thousands and thousands of men and women swiftly passing and repassing each other over a stretching sea of ice that apparently has no more limit than space itself. It is a beautiful work of art, and the more one looks at it the more he is pleased with it. Mrs. Nathaniel Holland, the lady who has charge of it, invented and constructed it herself. Adjectives. When you catch an adjective, kill it. No, I don't mean utterly, but kill most of them. Then the rest will be valuable. They weaken when they are close together. They give strength when they are wide apart. An adjective habit, or a wordy, diffuse, flowery habit, once fastened upon a person, is as hard to get rid of as any other vice. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 15th, 1864. County Hospital Developments. They do say that when rogues fall out, honest men get their dues. Messrs. Vogel and Isaacs of the county hospital have fallen out. The seeming insinuation in the remark is the fruit solely of unworthy suspicion in the prejudiced mind of the reader. Isadore Isaacs, who for years has had the lucrative job of repairing all the windows that chanced to be broken in the hospital, a day or two ago procured the arrest of Vogel, an employee of his, for using improper language to Mrs. Isaacs. Vogel said at the time that if the charge against him was prosecuted, he would retaliate upon Isaacs and others connected with the hospital by throwing open to the public gaze such a 3 years' history of corruption and swindling in that institution as would set San Francisco dizzy with amazement. To make his threat good, he went yesterday to Officer Lindheimer and Detective Officer Watkin, and complained that for the past 3 years his boss, Isaacs, had been in the constant habit of charging in his bills against the county double and treble the amount of glass actually put into the hospital windows by him, and that he did it with the resident physician, Dr. Raymond's, connivance and consent, and that when the doctor heard of Vogel's threatened expose, he offered him $20 to keep quiet. Vogel says that whenever Isaacs put in 10 panes of glass, he always charged the city for 30. For 30 pains he charged 75, or such a matter, in his bills, and so on and so forth, thus managing, by naturally quick talents and close attention to business, to make a good thing out of an unpromising contract, with no capital save a gift in the way of slinging a multiplication table which amounted almost to inspiration. Mr. Vogel says he will prove that in 3 years the officers of the hospital paid Isaacs $1,300 for repaired windows, but he does not know how much the city and county paid to those officers in the same time for the same work, a remark of Mr. Vogel's which savors of an insinuation. According to a judgment of men and their manners under circumstances where crime and their direct or indirect implication in it is concerned, sharpened by his long experience as a detective, Officer Watkin is satisfied that Vogel knows a vast deal about the hidden mysteries of the conduct of the hospital, but he seems in doubt about the policy of unveiling them all in a heap. Upon the complaint made by Vogel, Chief Burke had Isaacs arrested, and upon the examination of the case today, comprehensive developments may be looked for. Considering the important nature of the case, however, Judge Shepard should not have allowed Isaacs his liberty on $50 or $60 worth of greenbacks, $150 in shin plasters. Now, how much credence is to be given to the statements of Vogel, who is smarting under a sense of injury, we are not prepared to say. But at the same time, if there are 2 departments of service in the hospital that are not the subject of suspicion in the minds of taxpayers, we do not know it. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 15, 1864. Interesting litigation. San Francisco beats the world for novelties, but the inventive faculties of her people are exercised on a specialty. We don't care much about creating things other countries can supply us with. We have on hand a vast quantity of a certain kind of material, and we must work it up, and we do work it up often to an alarming pitch. Controversy is our forte. Californians can raise more legal questions and do the wager of combat in more ways than have been eliminated from the arcana of civil and military jurisprudence since Justinian wrote or Agamemnon fought. Suits. Why, we haven't names for half of them. A man has a spite at his neighbor, and what man or man's wife hasn't, and he forthwith prosecutes him in the police court for having onions for breakfast, under some ordinance or statutory provision having about as much relation to the case as the title page of Webster's dictionary. And then there's an array of witnesses who are well posted in everything else except the matter in controversy, and indefatigable attorneys enlighten the court by drawing from the witnesses the whole detailed history of the last century, and then again we are in doubt about some little matter of personal or public convenience, and slap goes somebody into court under duress of a warrant. If we want to determine the age of a child who has grown out of our knowledge, we commence a prosecution at once against someone else with children, and elicit from witnesses enough chronological information to fill a whole encyclopedia to prove that our child of a doubtful age was contemporary with the children of defendant, and thus approximate to the period of nativity sought for. A settlement of mutual accounts is arrived at by a prosecution for obtaining goods or money under false pretenses. Partnership affairs are elucidated in the prosecution for grand larceny. A burglary simply indicates that a creditor called at the house of his debtor the night before market morning to collect a small bill. We have nothing but a civil code. A portion of our laws are criminal in name only. We have no law for crime. Cut, slosh around with pistols and dirk knives as you will, and the worst that comes of it is a petty charge for carrying concealed weapons, and murder is but an aggravated assault and battery. We go into litigation instinctively, like a young duck goes into the water. A man can't dig a shovel full of sand out of a drift that threatens to overwhelm his property, nor put a fence around his lot that some person has once driven a wagon across, but what he is dragged before some tribunal to answer to a misdemeanor. Personal revenge, or petty jealousies and animosities, or else the pursuit of information under difficulties, keep up a heavy calendar, and the judge of the court spends three-fourths of his time listening to old women's quarrels and tales that ought, in many cases, to consign the witnesses themselves to the prison cell, and dismissing prosecutions that are brought without probable cause nor the shadow of it. A prosecuting people we are, and we are getting no better every day. The census of the city can almost be taken now from the police court calendar, and a month's attendance on that institution will give one a familiar acquaintance with more than half of our domestic establishments. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 16, 1864. Extraordinary Enterprise. It is said by those who ought to know that the law against killing game only suspended operation at midnight on Wednesday, yet there were quails for breakfast at the Occidental at 6 o'clock the next morning. The man who brought those birds to town will wear himself out some time or other in getting up at such unseasonable hours of the night to take advantage of an outgoing law. It would be wrong to suspect him of having captured the quails the day before. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 16, 1864. More donations. A Chinese merchant of this city has left a superb Chinese lantern at the Mechanics' Fair to be sold for the benefit of the Sanitary Fund, and certain young ladies are in the pleasant habit of leaving handsome bouquets on the Big Cheese daily to be disposed of for the same charity. By far the most interesting curiosity of all, however, has lately been added to the collection in the Floral Tower. It is a voluminous and very musty old book, printed in London 200 years ago, in the reign of Charles II, and is rich with the quaint language, spelling, and typography of the olden time. It is a chronicle of the kings of England, and is carried down to the year 1664, the second of Charles's reign. The chapter which gives the names of the members of the High Commission, before which Charles I was tried and condemned to death, is racy with comments upon the bad character, the ignominious pursuits, and the former social obscurity of those gentlemen, and must have occasioned great discomfort to such of them as were still living at the time of its publication. During the trial of the friendless monarch, his staff fell to the floor, and seeing that none moved to take it up, he put forth his hand and took it up himself. The chronicler seemed to feel that no comment was needed there to show the deep humiliation into which the poor king had fallen, and he made none. At another stage of the trial, the head of the king's staff fell off, and a sense of the dreadful omen flitted across the countenances of the superstitious multitude around him. The old book contains the genealogy of the reigning monarch and that of all the nobility of England. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 16, 1864. Suicide of Dr. Raymond. We gather the following facts concerning this sad event from Chief Burke. At 8 o'clock yesterday morning, the daily papers, as usual, were taken to the doctor before he had risen from bed. After the lapse of half an hour, he was found lying in an insensible condition from the effects of a heavy dose of morphine which he had swallowed. He had been reading, apparently. The Alta, with his spectacles lying upon it, was on the bed. Antidotes were administered, and the stomach pump applied, and he rallied enough to show by the intelligence in his eyes that he recognized the persons who stood about him, but he was speechless. In spite of all efforts to expel the poison from his system and annul its effects, he gradually sank until a few minutes past 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when he died. Ever since his removal from the position of resident physician of the county hospital, by the Board of Supervisors, on last Monday week, Dr. Raymond had been in a state of great mental depression and unhappiness, and during the 3 days preceding his death he had several times expressed fears that he was going to commit suicide. He told Dr. Nuttall that he was possessed of a suicidal devil, and gave that gentleman his knife because of a desire he felt to use it upon himself. He refused the doctor's request that he would remain with him at his house, however. Dr. Raymond also mentioned this yearning to commit suicide to Mr. Pond at the hospital, and said, "Keep an eye on me." Dr. Raymond occupied the post of resident physician of the city and county hospital during the past 6 or 7 years. He came here from St. Louis about 10 years ago, and those who knew him best speak highly of his character. He was about 50 years of age. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 16, 1864. The alleged swindling. The sworn statement before the proper officer of Vogel that his employer, Isaacs, had received $1,300 in 3 years for repairs to the windows of the county hospital does not tally with the auditor's books, which show bills paid to Dr. Raymond for this purpose amounting to only $80.87. If Vogel really knows of any criminality in the management of the affairs of the hospital, it should be wrung from him, upon Isaac's trial, so that if any be guilty they may be punished, and in order that if he has made false charges, suspicion may be removed from the parties wronged. If his statements are invented simply to gratify a thirst for revenge, the facts should be ferreted out and a stool of repentance provided for him in the state prison. The San Francisco Daily Morning Call, September 16, 1864. Officer Rose recovering. Detective Officer Rose, who a few days ago was beaten and stabbed near Santa Clara by a prisoner named Mortimer, whom he had arrested, is now entirely out of danger, and will be about the streets again shortly. We are glad it is so, for while rascality is so plenty hereabouts, the city could ill afford to lose so accomplished a detective. Officer Bovey, one of the men sent to track Mortimer through the southern country, has returned without having been able to obtain the slightest clue to his whereabouts. End of section 43.